Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, June 7th, 2023. House Freedom Caucus members and Speaker Kevin McCarthy still at odds, shutting down legislative business on the House floor for a second day. It's all stemming from the Speaker's negotiated deal with President Joe Biden on suspending the nation's debt ceiling to avoid a default and cutting spending, though not as much as the conservative Republicans wanted. Coming up, we hear from two of those Republicans who have put a halt to business, plus Speaker McCarthy, and talk with a congressional reporter from the Hill, Mychael Schnell. Republican presidential candidate field for 2024 gets three new entries: former Vice President Mike Pence, North Dakota Governor Doug Bergum, and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. White House, with the federal response to the haze from Canada wildfires blanketing large parts of the northeastern United States and making the connection to the need for the president's climate change agenda. The acting Labor Secretary Julie Su testifies before a House committee. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak begins his visit to Washington, meeting congressional leaders, talking about the war in Ukraine, economic policy, and other topics. Tomorrow he'll be at the White House with President Biden. And a new statue unveiled in Statuary Hall in the U.S. Capitol. A bronze statue of Pulitzer Prize-winning author Willa Cather, representing Nebraska. The House floor legislative agenda was canceled for a second day, with the ongoing dispute between House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and a small group of House Republicans not happy with how the Speaker handled negotiations with President Joe Biden that resulted in the deal to suspend the nation's debt ceiling days before a default and also cut some federal spending. One of those Republicans, Matt Gaetz of Florida, tweeting this morning, "House leadership couldn't hold the line, now we hold the floor." Shortly after the House gavelled in at noon Eastern, it gavelled out.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the Chair.
Congressman Matt Gaetz and Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, two of the members who helped defeat the procedural motion on Wednesday, would have allowed other bills to be debated and voted on, and they were promising to defeat that rule again today. We're on Steve Bannon's podcast, War Room. They talked about being upset over the debt ceiling and spending cut bill worked out by Speaker McCarthy and President Biden. And also, Republican Congressman Andrew Clyde of Georgia saying that he was threatened with having his bill that would deal with overturning a Biden administration gun regulation not be brought to the floor if he didn't support the debt ceiling agreement. Here's Congressman Gaetz.
We have told the Speaker that there will be no rule votes until the pistol brace bill passes. However, we believe that our committees should continue their work.
Yes.
On Thursday, there's supposed to be a committee markup in the House Oversight Committee to hold Christopher Wray in contempt, a contempt that he so richly deserves. And I have been told that leadership's teams are meeting right now, and they're thinking about punishing House conservatives and just sending everybody home this week and canceling the committee work and the contempt work as a way to stick it to us for making demands that they keep their promises.
They're going to say, if you hold the floor and there's no votes, we're sending everybody home. Suck on that. And there'll be no work, and you're going to be blamed on this.
And we still have work to do, and we can do them in our committees.
Absolutely. And we can do a lot of work on the floor in the absence
Yes.
of leadership rules. We've got national emergencies we could repeal. We have impeachments that could be considered on the floor. So we are not calling for a pause in action. We are actually trying to dial up the activity, but we're not going to do the failure theater anymore.
Yesterday, we took down a procedural rule, a rule vote that halted the floor, and we seized control over it. It didn't halt our work on committees and everything else that we could be doing for the American people. I serve on the Oversight Committee, and we are supposed to have a markup on Thursday to hold Christopher Wray in contempt. Now leadership is threatening to send everyone home because we are holding the floor and cancel all of those committees that are having hearings and doing actual work. That means that they are going to cancel this markup to hold Christopher Wray in contempt. Now, we are not going back to the Pelosi era of politics.
And the imperial speakership is over?
The imperial speakership is over, as it was greatly stated yesterday. And we have some demands.
Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, Republican from Colorado, and Congressman Matt Gaetz, Republican from Florida, on Steve Bannon's podcast, War Room, today. After the House came in and then quickly went into recess, subject to the call of the chair around noon Eastern, Speaker Kevin McCarthy spoke to reporters in the hallway of the U.S. Capitol about the disagreement with the Freedom Caucus and other conservative members over that debt ceiling and spending reduction bill that passed the House and Senate and signed into law last week.
Yes, have you resolved this standoff with the Freedom Caucus?
We're talking through it. I think we'll get this through it.
Are you going to have votes today?
That's our intention. We're working through it. We can't hold up the work for the American people. I can't believe someone would want to hold up not allowing people to pick their own oven or stove they'd like to have.
But they say that you violated your deal at the speakership. Spending cuts, ensuring that all spending levels were capped at 2022 levels being one of them, among other issues, they said.
Well, we never promised we're going to be all at 22 levels. I said we would strive to get to the 22 level or the equivalent of an amount to cut. We met all that criteria. And if you watch the Senate, think for one moment. Congress only likes to spend more money. This is one of the first to ever spend less than we spent the year before. If you take the non-defense and you take the veterans out of it, it's lower than the 22 level. But defense moved up, but we even have Republican senators on the other side said that wasn't enough. So I think we kind of hit the sweet spot. The difficult part, when anytime you try to work any type of agreement, you're not going to get 100% of what you want. But think of what we did achieve. Spending less than we spent before, taking non-defense outside of veterans. So we gave more money to defense and to veterans. I think the majority want that. 2/3 of Republicans voted for this bill. On average, historically, when there's a Democrat president and a debt ceiling, only 24% vote for it. This is a higher percent voting for it than even when Republicans are president on a debt ceiling. We got work requirements, one of the big things we wanted to achieve. We were able to put pay-go on the president. We took Trump's language and put that in. We got reform so we can cut red tape and build again. Did I want more? Yes, but now we move to the next level. We move to appropriations, where there's a number of more victories we can achieve. We got the money they would spend this year on IRS. Would I want to get more? Yes. We got another $20 billion, but there's more to come to be able to battle for. So I think there's a lot of victories here, and we can have the approach to go through, but the longer we delay, the harder time that will be.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy with reporters in the hallway of the U.S. Capitol building. Mychael Schnell, congressional reporter with The Hill, has been following the developments with the Speaker and the House Freedom Caucus members, joining us now by phone from Capitol Hill. Thanks for being with us. So the procedural vote failed on Tuesday with the Freedom Caucus members protesting the debt ceiling and spending cut agreement with the president. What's been going on today?
Yeah, so that's exactly right, Michael. So today, nothing has exactly changed. We are still in this sort of standstill situation. As you mentioned, those members of those conservative House lawmakers, a number of whom are members of the House Freedom Caucus, they opposed a rule yesterday to bring 4 bills to the floor, various pieces of legislation. They did that as a retaliation for that debt limit bill. They're still frustrated by A, how that bill was crafted, and B, what was actually in it. So as a form of retaliation, they blocked the rule, which essentially does not allow that legislation to advance to the floor and leaves the House with no bills to vote on. So we are still currently in a standstill. House conservatives are still angry. They still have issues with leadership that have not been resolved. So as those problems persist, the House is unable to move forward with any legislation.
Have those conservative members said specifically what their issues are, what they want in order to let the rules pass and the other bills come up?
Not yet, and that is one of the complicated parts of the situation. So broadly speaking, they have said that they are frustrated with that debt limit bill crafted by Speaker McCarthy and President Biden. Again, broadly speaking, conservatives have been frustrated with the lack of spending cuts in the bill. They didn't think that they were aggressive enough, and also with the lack of provisions in the bill. They're comparing it to the debt limit bill that House Republicans passed back in April, saying that the McCarthy-Biden bill was a watered-down version of that piece of legislation. There's also some frustrations about a bill crafted by Andrew Clyde that has to do with pistol braces. There was some back and forth. Clyde had accused Scalise and leadership of threatening to hold up consideration of that bill if Clyde ultimately voted against the rule for the debt limit bill. Clyde did vote against the rule, and Clyde then went ahead with this accusation against Scalise. But that seems like it's been cleaned up, because Scalise said that the House will be voting on that brace that pistol brace piece of legislation next week. So we've been asking conservatives, what exactly do we want? We understand you're frustrated with how the quiet situation was handled. We understand you're frustrated with how the debt limit bill situation was handled. But what can break this impasse? They would not give us specifics. So until House GOP leadership is aware of what the demands are, it doesn't really seem like things can move much.
We're talking with Mychael Schnell, congressional reporter with The Hill. How about Speaker Kevin McCarthy? What is his reaction to all this and his demeanor about it?
Yeah, well, McCarthy said today that it's his intention that the House will vote today. It does not. There's no indication that will happen again because this impasse, this standoff is still in place. But McCarthy has been remaining optimistic, saying that, this is part of the job, that conflict, this is what happens, and that they're going to get through it. So he's having that bullish, optimistic tone. But look, the fact of the matter is, conservatives are not relenting in this criticism. There does not seem to be any solution to this impasse in the near future, or the immediate future, rather, and that's holding up legislative business in the House.
Even when this gets worked out, and presumably it'll eventually be worked out, what does it mean for bills going forward, especially spending bills that the Speaker will be talking with the President about?
Yeah, well, look, this shows that these conservatives, especially those members of the Freedom Caucus, they found a strategy that works, right? They have leverage right now in this situation. They are going to likely be able to extract some concessions from McCarthy. So I think it's entirely possible that we can see them use these rules to hold up legislation in the future if they ever again get frustrated with how McCarthy and leadership handle various measures. But you also bring up appropriations. That is likely going to be the next battle on the horizon. A number of conservatives have said that they are frustrated with the debt limit bill, and they plan to sort of, fix those issues through the appropriations process to extract more of those spending cuts that they wish were in that debt limit bill. So appropriations is definitely a next landmark battle that is on the horizon. But if yesterday and today's standstill is any indication, it is going to be a fierce battle come September.
Mychael Schnell, congressional reporter with The Hill. Find our stories at thehill.com and on Twitter at Mychael Schnell. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks for having me.
And a reminder that the C-SPAN networks cover the Congress gavel to gavel when they're in session. The House on C-SPAN television, the Senate on C-SPAN 2. You can also follow them on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. This is Washington Today. 3 more Republicans have announced their candidacies for President of the United States. Former Vice President Mike Pence, North Dakota Governor Doug Bergum, both of those today. And Tuesday night, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, bringing the total seeking the Republican presidential nomination in 2024 to at least a dozen. CNN writes that Mike Pence's presidential bid places him in a unique position as he becomes the first vice president in modern history to challenge his old boss, who's the current frontrunner for the 2024 GOP nomination. Though a loyal second-in-command to Donald Trump, Mike Pence broke with him by refusing to overturn the 2020 election results and presiding over Congress's certification of Joe Biden's victory on January 6, 2021. That reporting from CNN. Mike Pence made his announcement and talked about this as he kicked off his campaign in Ankeny, Iowa.
I'll always be grateful for what President Trump did for this country. I've often prayed for him over the past few years. And I prayed for him again today. I had hoped he would come around and see that he had been misled about my role that day. But that was not to be. So let me say, I stand before you today as a candidate for president to say to the Republican Party must be the party of the Constitution of the United States. Look, we've had enough of the Democrats and the radical left repeatedly trampling on our Constitution, threatening to pack the court, to dismantle the God-given rights that are enshrined there. We must stand on the Constitution to protect the God-given right to life. We must stand on the Constitution to protect the right to keep and bear arms. We must stand for the Constitution to protect the right to live, to work, to worship according to the dictates of our faith and conscience. The American people must know that leaders in the Republican Party will keep our oath to support and defend the Constitution, even when it's not in our political interest to do so. And one last word that in part brings us here today. I believe that anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be President of the United States. And anyone who asks someone else to put them over the Constitution should never be President of the United States again.
Republican presidential candidate Mike Pence, former vice president, also former governor and congressman from Indiana, announcing his run today in Ankeny, Iowa. Iowa will host the first 2024 presidential caucuses for the Republican Party. Today, by the way, is also Mike Pence's birthday. He's 64 years old. North Dakota's Republican Governor Doug Bergum also announcing for president today. NBC News writes that Governor Bergum is offering himself as a candidate of small-town values who can help steer the country in a different direction, and that he is the latest addition to a field that is expanding with GOP hopefuls eager to assert themselves as the most appealing alternative to the frontrunner, former President Donald Trump. Governor Bergum held a rally in Fargo, North Dakota.
Right now, the world, our economy, are both changing rapidly, and how we respond will define our future. Technology is changing every job, every company, and every industry. And this change will become more rapid than ever before. We need new leadership for the changing economy. We need a leader who understands the real work that Americans do every day. Someone who's worked alongside our farmers, our ranchers, and our small business owners. Someone who's held jobs where you shower at the end of the day, not at the beginning. Someone who's got decades of success selling our technology overseas and knows the threats and the risks to our future from foreign state-sponsored competitors stealing and pirating our intellectual property. We need a leader who's experienced firsthand that we win as a country when our innovators and entrepreneurs can soar and when every single person can grow and thrive. To unlock the best of America, we need a leader who's clearly focused on three things: economy, energy, and national security. And that is why today I'm officially announcing I'm running for the President of the United States of America.
Governor Doug Bergum, Republican from North Dakota, today in Fargo. A Politico article with some background on him has this: a North Dakota native, Doug Bergum previously worked as a consultant at McKinsey & Company. He later founded Great Plains Software, a tech company that was eventually acquired by Microsoft. He first assumed his current office in 2016, winning an easy victory against the Democratic and Libertarian candidates. His current term, which began in 2020, is set to end in December 2024. And Governor Bergum endorsed former President Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020. That from Politico. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie also announcing his campaign for the Republican presidential nomination. He did it Tuesday night in a town hall event in Manchester, New Hampshire. That's the state that will be holding the first Republican presidential primaries. New York Times writes, in making a second run for the presidency, Mr. Christie has positioned himself as the person most willing to attack both Mr. Trump, his former friend turned adversary, and Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, who has been in second place in nearly every public Republican primary poll for months. Mr. Christie, who declared his run on Tuesday evening at a town hall-style event in New Hampshire, set himself apart from all other Republicans running by going directly after Mr. Trump. He called him a bitter, angry man, said his record in office was a failure, and in an unusually personal attack, accused Mr. Trump and family members of profiting off the presidency, referring to an investment from the Saudi crown prince. That reporting from the New York Times. Here is Chris Christie, Tuesday night in Manchester.
And so now we have pretenders all around us who want to tell you, pick me. because I'm kind of like what you picked before, but not quite as crazy. But I don't want to say his name because for these other pretenders, he is, for those of you who read the Harry Potter books, like Voldemort. He is he who shall not be named. Well, let me be clear, in case I have not been already. The person I am talking about, who is obsessed with the mirror, who never admits a mistake, who never admits a fault, and who always finds someone else and something else to blame for whatever goes wrong, but finds every reason to take credit for anything that goes right, is Donald Trump. And if we don't have that conversation with you, we don't deserve to ask for your vote. We don't deserve the mantle of leadership. We don't deserve to have you think of us as people worthy of leadership. I'm going to end with this. I read a great quote from a letter that John Adams wrote to Abigail Adams during the beginning of the Revolutionary War. She asked him in a letter to him, what did he think was going to happen? Were we going to win? And his response to her was, I can't guarantee success in this war, but I can guarantee something better, that we deserve it. So I'll say to you tonight that I can't guarantee you success in what I'm about to do. But I guarantee you that at the end of it, you will have no doubt in your mind who I am and what I stand for and whether I deserve it. So that's why I came back to St. Anselm's, and that's why I came back to Manchester, and that's why I came back to New Hampshire to tell all of you that I intend to seek the Republican nomination for President of the United States in 2024, and I want your support.
Chris Christie, former New Jersey governor and former presidential candidate in 2016, Tuesday night at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics at St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire. Cornel West, former Harvard philosophy professor and longtime activist, also announced his presidential campaign this week. He said in a Twitter video, "I've decided to run for truth and justice," which takes the form of running for president of the United States as a candidate for the People's Party. And he says he'll focus on health care, living wages, housing, reproductive rights, and, quote, de-escalating the destruction of the planet, the destruction of American democracy. U.S. House Republicans held a hearing today on their bill that would overhaul Washington, D.C.'s election laws. It's titled the ACE Act for American Confidence in Elections. It was a joint hearing of the Oversight Committee and House Administration Committee. Congressman Brian Stile, Republican from Wisconsin, chairs the House Administration Committee.
In the 2020 general election, the D.C. Board of Elections mailed every person on an unmaintained list a ballot. A post-election audit found that 11% of the 421,000 ballots sent were undeliverable. That's nearly 50,000 ballots. 2 years later, during the 2022 midterm, 508,000 ballots were mailed and nearly 90,000 were undeliverable. That's on top of hundreds of voters who were mailed incorrect ballots. Did D.C. work to address these errors? No. D.C. allows voting without a photo ID. D.C. allows ballot harvesting. D.C. allows non-citizens to vote. It's a huge problem. The ACE Act will fix it. We already know that left-leaning organizations accept millions in foreign money intended to influence American politics. We should all work against foreign influence in our elections. But what will D.C. do? Under a new local law, D.C. made elections more susceptible to foreign interference. After living here for just 30 days, embassy staff from Russia or China could cast a ballot in Washington, D.C. elections. This is beyond unacceptable. American elections should be for American citizens. Our nation's capital should be a beacon of democracy and a national model for excellence in elections administration. This isn't about who wins or loses elections, but rather ensuring voters have confidence in our elections. That's why we need the ACE Act.
Congressman Brian Stile, Republican from Wisconsin, chair of the House Administration Committee, at today's joint hearing with the Oversight and Accountability Committee. The ranking Democrat on that Oversight Committee is Jamie Raskin from Maryland.
Instead of bringing the people of Washington, D.C. into the Union on an equal footing with the people of the 50 states, they seek to bring the disenfranchisement and political marginalization afflicting D.C. to people all across America with their proposals for tactical voter suppression, election repression, and registration depression. And what's the justification for their sledgehammer attack on local elections in Washington today? There is none. D.C. already has free, fair, and secure elections for the public offices that are open to the people. In fact, D.C. has some of the most accessible and secure elections in the country. Through its pro-voter laws, D.C. has one of the highest registered voter rates in the country. And the local non-citizen voting policy identified by the chair is just for local elections, not for D.C.'s non-voting delegate in the House of Representatives. And this policy, by the way, follows up upon what was a central article of faith for the Republican Party in the 19th century, that people who come to the country as immigrants who are on the pathway to citizenship should have the right to vote and participate in local and school board elections.
Congressman Jamie Raskin is the ranking Democrat on the Oversight and Accountability Committee, which co-hosted today's hearing with the House Administration Committee on this Republican proposal to reform Washington, D.C.'s election laws. A Washington Post article on the hearing has this. It was part, they write, of the most aggressive and sustained interest Republicans have taken in intervening in D.C. affairs in years, with new bills or hearings or votes targeting D.C. policies sprouting up seemingly every other week. Congress has oversight of D.C. because of a provision in the Constitution, a responsibility that Republicans in this Congress have enthusiastically leveraged. That from the Washington Post. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Live Thursday on C-SPAN Radio. At 9 a.m. Eastern, the House Oversight and Accountability Committee meets to consider whether to hold FBI Director Christopher Wray in contempt of Congress for not giving the committee a document related to its investigation of the overseas business dealings of President Biden and his family. That's live Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern on C-SPAN Radio. Listen anywhere on the C-SPAN mobile app or ask your smart speaker to play C-SPAN Radio.
When citizens are truly informed, our republic thrives. Get informed straight from the source on C-SPAN. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. From the nation's capital to wherever you are. Because the opinion that matters the most is your own. This is what democracy looks like. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. An article from Associated Press: smoke from Canadian wildfires poured into the U.S. East Coast and Midwest on Wednesday, covering the capitals of both nations in an unhealthy haze, holding up flights at major airports and prompting people to fish out pandemic-era face masks. While Canadian officials asked other countries for help fighting more than 400 blazes nationwide that already have displaced 20,000 people, air quality with what the U.S. rates as hazardous levels of pollution extended into central New York. Massive tongues of unhealthy air extended as far as Virginia and Indiana, affecting millions of people. That reporting from Associated Press. The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre giving an update today on the federal government's response, and she also makes a connection to President Biden's climate change agenda.
So I wanted to provide an update on the wildfire smoke impacting millions of Americans across the country right now. The president was briefed on the wildfires in Canada last week and has been regularly updated since. He directed his team to provide impacted communities whatever support they need. Our team here at the White House is in touch with the Government of Canada. We have already deployed over 600 U.S. firefighters and personnel, as well as equipment like water bombers to help Canada battle the fires. We also have been in close touch with state and local leaders, including in Michigan, Illinois, and New York. And multiple agencies, including the Environmental Protection Agency, CDC, and FEMA, are coordinating with state, local, and tribal governments to get timely and accurate information out to communities about local air quality conditions and what steps they can take to protect themselves. We encourage everyone in the impacted areas to listen to their state and local officials. Check in on your neighbors, check in on your friends and your family. Take precautions, especially if you have health conditions. You can also go to airnow.gov. That's AIRNOW.gov. Again, that's airnow.gov to get real-time information about air quality and precautions you can take. Or download the app, the AirNow app, from the App Store as well. You're able to do that. Now, I know for many communities out west, this is nothing new. They experience this every year, but it is certainly getting worse. It is yet another alarming example of the ways in which the climate crisis is disturbing our lives and our communities. That's why from day one, President Biden rightfully recognized the climate crisis, climate change, as one of the four crises facing our nation as he was coming into the Oval Office after being inaugurated, and why he made tackling climate change one of his top priorities and has done historic investments in doing just that, move forward with historic policies.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre with reporters in the White House briefing room today. From ABC News, hazy and dangerous fumes from ongoing wildfires in Canada have engulfed the skies over much of the northeast U.S., prompting serious air quality alerts in at least 13 states. Canadian officials and firefighters are scrambling to put out the blazes. So far this wildfire season, Canada has seen more than 8.7 million acres burned, an area larger than the state of Vermont. This is Washington Today. With the debt crisis averted and summer recess approaching, writes USA Today, the debate over whether to confirm President Joe Biden's pick for Labor Secretary Julie Su is intensifying on Capitol Hill. President Biden nominated Julie Su, the Deputy Labor Secretary, a little over 3 months ago, and she has been leading the department since former Labor Secretary Marty Walsh left the role in March. Yet her nomination has not come up to the Senate floor for a vote, leaving the position that oversees jobs and employment in limbo. USA Today article also has this: moderate Democrats and independent senators are still weighing whether to support Julie Su, who was Labor Secretary of California when President Biden tapped her to work with Marty Walsh. She would be the first Asian American to hold a cabinet secretary position in the Biden administration if she is confirmed. Again, that all from USA Today. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer asked whether the nomination would get a vote.
Yes.
Will Julie Su get a vote on the Senate floor?
We are working very, very hard to get Julie Su confirmed.
The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, speaking with reporters. The acting Labor Secretary, Julie Su, nominated for Secretary, testified today before the U.S. House Education and Workforce Committee, and in some ways it resembled a Senate confirmation hearing. Congressman Bobby Scott of Virginia, the ranking Democrat on the committee, in his opening statement called on the Senate to confirm her.
Committee Democrats and I strongly support Ms. Su's nomination to be Secretary of Labor because she represents the best of America. She's the daughter of immigrants who owned a small laundromat and a franchise pizza restaurant and became the first in her family to attend law school. But we support Acting Secretary Su's nomination not just because of who she is, but for what she has done. Throughout her service as California Labor Commissioner, Secretary of the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency, Deputy Secretary of Labor, she is a committed public servant who has dedicated her career to supporting workers and families. Thanks to her and President Biden's leadership and the responsible actions taken by Democrats in the last Congress, unemployment rates remain near historic lows. Our job market is continuing to grow, and workers are seeing higher wages. Since taking office, the Biden administration has created more than 13 million jobs. That's more jobs created in 28 months than any previous president has created in a single 48-month term.
Congressman Bobby Scott, Democrat from Virginia, the Education and the Workforce Committee ranking member, at today's hearing with the witness, Julie Su, acting labor secretary, nominated for secretary. Congressman Kevin Kiley, Republican from California, an outspoken critic of her nomination, made that clear in his questioning.
Just to make sure I have your background correct, you were the Secretary of the Labor and Workforce Development Agency in California from 2019 to 2021?
Correct.
And you were the California Labor Commissioner from 2011 to 2018?
Correct.
So in your Senate testimony in April, you touted President Biden's economic record. You said the results speak for themselves. And you specifically cited the unemployment rate. You said it's been less than 4% for more than a year, which is close to the lowest it's been in 50 years. Do you happen to know how your home state of California is doing when it comes to the unemployment rate there versus other states?
Thank you very much, Congressman. I don't know what the current unemployment rate in California is.
So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, California currently has the second highest unemployment rate in the nation. Does that sound right?
I don't know. I trust that you have that correct.
So if a low unemployment rate, by your own testimony, is a sign of good economic stewardship, what does it tell us about California that it has the nation's second highest unemployment rate?
So thank you very much for that question, Congressman. You are correct that we share a home state and that I was the labor secretary for from 2019 to 2021, and prior to that, the labor commissioner, where my job was to enforce wage and hour laws in workplaces.
Right, we've established that. So the question about the unemployment rate, which by the way was similar during your tenure, 2020, 2021, California was first, second, or third highest unemployment rate in the country. So you yourself have said at a low unemployment rate says we're doing a good job. What does it mean that California has a high unemployment rate?
I think, Congressman, we would likely agree that there are lots of measures of what makes a strong economy, and there's lots of ways to look at, obviously it makes sense for us to try to address high unemployment, because having people who are looking for jobs be able to do jobs, and having people who are in jobs be able to upskill and get to better jobs is a goal that I know we share, but I don't think it's...
Let's talk about a couple other measures. You said in your testimony in April, too many people still work full-time year-round and live in poverty. According to the latest Census Bureau data, the supplemental poverty measure, do you happen to know which state has the highest real poverty rate in the country?
I don't know that, sir.
It actually happens to be California. And do you happen to know, according to a recent report from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, where California ranks when it came to net earnings growth this last year?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
California was 50th out of 50. So if our goals are to reduce unemployment, reduce poverty, and to increase wages, is California really the best model, given that it is the absolute worst in the country of the 50 states by all of these measures?
Again, Congressman, I think that there are lots of measures for how well an economy is doing. My understanding, and I haven't worked in California now for 2 years, but is that by some measures, including recovery from the pandemic, including decrease in poverty over the last few years, recovering since the pandemic, that California has
Okay, I just want to reiterate, though, these were the very measures that you yourself cited in your own testimony. And your state of California, where you led the Labor Department, is doing the worst in the country.
Congressman Kevin Kiley, Republican from California, questioning the acting labor secretary, Julie Su, at today's House Education and the Workforce Committee hearing. TheHill.com writes that in February 2023, President Biden nominated Julie Su to be Secretary of Labor, but she has not been confirmed yet, as Republicans have cited concerns about Julie Su for her stance on independent contractors and the gig economy and her handling of California's unemployment insurance program. That from The Hill. Wall Street today, the Dow up 91, NASDAQ down 171, S&P down 16. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak from the United Kingdom has begun his visit to Washington, D.C., meeting congressional leaders today. He'll be at the White House tomorrow to meet President Biden. On the agenda, the world's economy, the war in Ukraine, and as AP writes, Rishi Sunak, a Stanford University MBA graduate who dreams of creating a British Silicon Valley, also wants to discuss the promise and perils of artificial intelligence. He's eager to make sure the UK is not excluded from U.S.-EU talks on the subject. Rishi Sunak has floated an idea that the United Kingdom could be a center for regulating the fast-moving technology, though no major news on that front is expected during his trip. That from Associated Press. Here's one of the meetings today on Capitol Hill with the House Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
Are you all in? Yes, sir. All right. First of all, thank you very much. I mean, here we are a day from anniversary of D-Day, and you're going out to Arlington. Thank you for doing that. But our two nations have such long history and such great combination of not just our beliefs and our freedoms, but our economics. And I want to find every way we can to continue to build on all of those, because I think when our bond is stronger, the world is safer and democracy grows further.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's a great privilege and a pleasure to be here. Thank you for those kind words. And you're right, actually, being at Arlington this morning just reminds us of the long history between our countries and how we have, when we've stood together, I agree with you, the world has benefited. And what we need to do now is figure out how do we make sure that that relationship is strong to deal with the challenges of the future. I know that's what we're going to be talking about, but particularly strengthening our economies, because that's what it's all about.
It's important. You know, what was it, like 81 years ago, another prime minister, Winston Churchill, came here, and we'd have him speak in Congress. And I think we'll just build on what he talked about, too.
Yeah, it's a great foundation for us to cooperate on. So, no, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Okay, watch the furniture, please, on the way out. Thank you for staying Norwegian.
Very good. You guys need to come further. Take the picture with the Lincoln behind. You guys see that?
Yeah, it's very.
That's from his real. It's on loan. You know Frank Loan. You know Frank Loan.
Yeah. He's always. I feel like when he's always in the UK.
The British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Capitol Hill meeting with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. More from the Associated Press article on his visit to Washington. On Wednesday evening, Rishi Sunak will attend a Washington Nationals baseball game, though he won't throw out the opening pitch, to the disappointment of the British media. He stressed he was never meant to throw out the pitch at the game, which includes military bands and a flyover to celebrate the U.S.-UK ties. He said, "My sport is more cricket than baseball in any case." An update on the large dam breach in Ukraine, as NBC News reports that the destruction of the dam unleashed a torrent of water on southern Ukraine, threatening to sweep away villages and halt Ukrainian hopes of advancing across the Dnieper River. As officials scrambled to evacuate thousands, experts assessed the environmental toll, and both sides trade blame. One key question hung over the flooded fields of Kherson: who, if anyone, might stand to gain from this stunning turn in the war with Russia. That from NBC News. Some questions about the dam breach and the effect on the war today at the U.S. State Department briefing with spokesperson Vedant Patel.
This is probably a pointless exercise, but I'll ask anyway if there's anything new that you have to say about the Ukraine dam and what caused this.
We still conclusively don't have anything additional to offer on what happened at this point, but that is a process that continues to be underway, and we will share more information when we can. I will note, though, that 16,000 residents face immediate flood risk as a result of the damage and destruction, with an estimated 20,000 people needing to relocate. This flooding, as a result of this, puts not only homes, farms, and civilians at risk, but it also creates another challenge to maintaining safety in and around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, as well as it critically endangering the water supply to southern Ukraine, including Crimea. It additionally impacts the stability of the national power supply and threatens ecological systems and food security as well. But I don't have additional to your questions about attribution. I don't have any.
Okay, but you suggested, at least I think at the beginning, that you would have something to say about it sometime in the future.
When we have more information to share, we certainly will. I don't want to assign a timeline on it.
Is it an if and when, or is it a when?
Matt,
I mean, I'm just look, because we've been through this kind of song and dance before, where you guys have said that, okay, we're going to present stuff, and then
we will share information when we can.
Vedant Patel is a State Department principal deputy spokesperson being questioned by Matt Lee from the Associated Press at today's briefing at the State Department in Washington. A new statue was unveiled today in Statuary Hall in the U.S. Capitol building. author Willa Cather to represent Nebraska. In 1923, she was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for a novel set during World War I titled One of Ours. The Omaha World Herald writes, the bronze sculpture of Willa Cather shows her holding a walking stick in one hand and paper with her writing in another. She is taking a step through Nebraska's prairie, her gaze straight ahead under a wide-brimmed hat. At today's ceremony, one of the speakers, Senator Deb Fischer, Republican of Nebraska.
Cather's vivid, reflective writing has become synonymous with the pioneer spirit of Nebraska. Her fiction, epitomized by the Great Plains novel, O Pioneers, The Song of the Lark, and My Antonia, truly feels like it grew from the soil of Nebraska. Cather herself grew from that land. Her family settled in Red Cloud while she was still a child, and her imaginative mind put its roots down there in Webster County. For decades until her death in 1947, Cather was unable to shake her creative spirit away from its home on the open plains of the heartland. The unveiling of Cather's statue is especially poignant for me because Cather's fiction is not the only art to grow out of the land beneath her feet. In 2006, my sister-in-law, Nadine McHenry's art, was selected as part of the annual Willa Cather Conference that's organized by the Cather Foundation. I am a Nebraska painter, and my feet stand on the same prairie grasses that Cather stood on, Nadine wrote of her painting exhibition. Nadine's impressionistic paintings, they are a blend. They're a blend and imaginative representation of Cather's prose with Nadine's own personal experience on our family's ranch in the Nebraska Sandhills. 4 of the paintings, Longing, Isolation, Pioneering the Way, and Way Ahead, draw new vigor out of Cather's century-old works, each created as an expression of a different quote by the artist. Nadine's art illustrates the profound resonance of Cather's writing for those of us who call Nebraska home. That resonance, that talent, that imagination immortalized in Cather's indelible novels is what endows her with a significance to be placed here in the United States Capitol as a representation of Nebraska's best.
Senator Deb Fischer, Republican from Nebraska, at the ceremony at the unveiling of the statue of Willa Cather in Statuary Hall in the Capitol building in Washington. Each state is allowed 2 statues in the Statuary Hall collection, and the Nebraska legislature voted in 2018 to replace the statue of William Jennings Bryan with Willa Cather. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the stories Washington is talking about emailed to you every day. Subscribe at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night.